Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade, and well, in this one I'll be doing an update guide for Retribution Paladins in the War Within. This is because due to recent changes, Templar is now the dominant hero talent for all PvE content, so raids, Mythic Plus, and delves. And well, with that being said, let's start with the video. Okay guys, let's get into it and let's talk about talents. So here I'm going to give you 2 Mythic Plus builds and 1 raid build that you can use. But first, let's get into a small recap on what Templar does, what makes it work and what utility it brings to the table. Okay, so I'm really happy that we transitioned from Herald of the Sun to Templar, especially because of the dungeon pool that we're currently playing and how damage is in those circumstances. The Templar profile in terms of how it does its damage is really good because it's a lot of priority damage. It's very strong because of that, and it also takes less damage than Herald. I talked about this in the beta. Herald of the Sun is really good at recovery, but Templar is really good at preventing that damage happening. It gives us like really strong tools to just survive anything the dungeon can throw at us. Okay, so now the engine of Templar, it works similar to Herald of the Sun. It works with Wake of Ashes. Whenever you use it, instead of getting the downlights, you are going to get Hammer of Light, aka Big Hammer. This gives Templar its priority damage because it's going to hit your main target with a massive amount of damage, and it's going to do half of that to 4 nearby enemies. Additionally, you're going to throw Empyrean Hammers, which is the second part of the engine. This is going to make it so like little hammers drop from the sky to nearby targets. Once you use your Hammer of Light, you're going to drop 3 immediately, and there's a lot of talents in this tree that are going to amplify the effect and even make these single target hits AoE with some itemization. So now let's go into those. So the most important one is Shake the Heavens. So after you cast your Hammer of Light, you're going to get a buff on yourself that makes Empyrean Hammers drop on a nearby target every 2 seconds for 10 seconds. So you might think this is only 5 hammers, in 10 seconds, but it doesn't end there. You can extend the duration of Shake the Heavens with Higher Calling, with Crusading Strikes, Hammer of Wrath, and Blade of Justice. So you spam those abilities and you basically get permanent Shake the Heavens buff all the time while you are in combat. This is because of the buffs that Blizzard made to this. Literally, you're going to have Shake the Heavens all the time. This is really flexible, because even if you kill a pack and you still have Shake the Heavens, you can bring it to the next pack because it's a buff on yourself, and if you keep spamming abilities, as long as you have something to hit, you're always going to be dropping those little Empyrean Hammers. There's others hero talents that amplify the effect, like Zealous Vindication, that drops 2 additional Empyrean Hammers when you throw your Hammer of Light. So at the start of the pool, you're going to throw like 5 of them, and then you're just going to periodically throw more of them. Then you have Hammerfall that makes it so your Templar's Verdict Divine Storm call an additional Empyrean Hammer. And whenever Shake the Heavens is active, basically all the time, you're going to call 2 of them for every Holy Power Spender, which is incredibly strong. Other effects buff your Empyrean Hammers, like Sanctification. Whenever you throw a Judgment, this Judgment can be any Judgment, so Divine Toll counts and the Divine Resonance Judgments count. You're going to get 10% extra damage on Empyrean Hammers for 12 seconds. Multiple applications may overlap, so you're going to get a lot of value from just spamming your Judgment on cooldown. So the other steroid effect that Templar gives us is Undisputed Ruling. Whenever you use Hammer of Light, you apply Judgment to your targets, but more importantly, you get 15% haste for 8 seconds. This is an incredible boost to your rotation. It's going to feel very snappy once you throw your Hammer of Light, because you're going to get a massive amount of haste, which is multiplicative with your own haste, and also multiplicative with the haste that Crusade is going to give, because it's one of the talents that we're going to be choosing. In terms of utility, I forgot one thing. What makes Empyrean Hammers do AoE is Wrathful Descent. Whenever an Empyrean Hammer critically strikes, it's going to do 125% of its damage to nearby enemies. This is incredibly powerful, but you have to itemize for this. Once we get to the stat part of the guide, you are going to see that Critical Strike is very important, especially for Mythic Plus dungeon situations. And this brings us to the utility that Templar can give you, because it has an extra effect. Enemies hit by your Wrathful Descent, either the splash or the Empyrean Hammers itself, like the single target hit, are going to do 5% reduced damage to you. This is extremely reliable. Once you have enough crit, you're always going to apply this to the whole pack of mobs that you're playing in Mythic Plus dungeons. And well, it's 5% damage reduction. This basically brings us to pre-nerf numbers in terms of damage reduction. If you remember, Sanctified Plates used to reduce damage taken from AoE abilities by 6%. Well, basically we're back to that, by 10%, and now it's 6%. We're basically back to the 10%, and even we're 1% ahead, because 6% plus the 5% from Wrathful Descent equals 11. So yeah, we're ahead from where we were pre-nerf because of this. Incredibly powerful. This damage reduction not only is AoE, it can work for any ability that those mobs are going to throw at you. Really, really powerful preventative measure. The next preventative tool that we have is Sacrosanct Crusade. So whenever you throw Wake of Ashes, you're going to surround yourself with a holy barrier for 10% of your maximum health. So that's a pretty good deal, you know, but it doesn't end there. Hammer of Light also heals you for 5% of your maximum health and increases by 1% for each additional target hit. So at max, you can get 10% heal from that. But if you are full health, you are going to get a holy barrier that's the same amount, it's 10% of your max health. These two barriers, the Wake of Ashes one and the Hammer of Light one, can actually add up together. So if you get the two effects while you are max health, you're going to get a 20% max health barrier, which is incredibly powerful because this thing is on a 30-second cooldown because of the cooldown of Wake of Ashes. This is also really good because most boss abilities happen in those intervals, 30 seconds, 1 minute intervals, so you're going to have the shield for most of the dangerous parts of the fight. And even if you're not like fully topped off, with the Hammer of Light you can heal 10% of your health, which is really, really strong, as well as a recovery tool. So this is either a recovery or preventative damage measure, really, really strong utility from Templar. Other than that, Templar also has some movement speed that you can get with Unrelenting Charger. Divine Steed lasts 2 seconds longer and increases your movement speed by an additional 30% for the first seconds. This is just really nice to have, just to move around, and if you are in a bad mechanic, you can just move faster for those first 3 seconds to get out of there as soon as possible. The other option is not bad, and it works better in a coordinated group if you have like Discord, because you receive 20% less damage from your Blessing of Sacrifice, and every time the target takes damage, you get 4% movement speed up to 40% maximum. So like I said, this is better in a coordinated setting because let's say your tank friend needs the sack, so you sack them and you move a lot faster, which is really nice, or someone in your group needs the sacrifice, to survive a mechanic. It's better when people can call it, because it's kind of dangerous sometimes to use Blessing of Sacrifice, but this also reduces that damage you take from 20%. So this goes really well paired with Blessing of Sacrifice plus Sacrifice of the Just. But like I said, I think in pugs it's better to just go Unrelenting Charger. And well, yeah, that is the basic rundown of all the talents in Templar. Now let's go into the builds themselves. Okay guys, let's talk about the actual builds now. So these are for Mythic Plus dungeons, and this part is going to be actually shorter than the introduction to Templar, mostly because the builds are basically the same as when we were using Herald of the Sun. So for both Mythic Plus builds on the Paladin side, this is the setup that you're mostly going to be taking. One of the techs that I like to take is Obdurancy instead of Unbound Freedom. This is because Obdurancy gives you more damage reduction on top of the damage reduction that Templar has. Also, damage reduction is really nice with shields because the shields also get the benefit of the damage reduction. So if you take Obdurancy, you can add that up with Sanctified Plates, and you can add that up with Wrathful Descent, and you get like a 13% baseline damage reduction on most abilities, which is really, really powerful. But there's some places where you might want to take Unbound Freedom. Let's say, it's not Arcara, it's City of Threats. The last boss puts a nasty root on the whole group, so this Unbound Freedom can help you in those situations. So depending on the dungeon, Obdurancy or Unbound Freedom both are really good. Other than that, you're going to be taking most of your Paladin utility as always. Cleanse Toxins is pretty important in some dungeons, and it's also important for the current affix this week that we are. You can dispel the Zalata thingy, and it's going to give you a nice stat boost from that. That is if you're doing keys under 12. If you're doing keys over 12, only use Cleanse Toxins if the dungeon itself needs it. If not, you can remove the point and put it in Fist of Justice to get a shorter Hammer of Justice cooldown, which is always nice. Current control has been diminished in value a bit because of the changes that Blizzard made to mobs. Whenever you stun a mob that's casting, they're gonna just recast after the stun duration ends. The same with Blinding Light. Sometimes a Blinding Light can be actually counterproductive, because if you Blinding Light a pack of, let's say, casters, they are going to sink their cast and probably going to kill someone. So be ready with your kick after you Blinding Light or Fist of Justice a mob, you know, so it doesn't like surprise someone and just kill them. Other than that, we're taking most of our Paladin based on utility, you know, Blessing of Sacrifice, Blessing of Protection, and nothing changes from the Herald version of the guide. Down here, you know, we're still taking Seal of Order, Divine Resonance, Divine Toll, and Divine Purpose. Divine Purpose actually has really good synergy with Templar, because Hammer of Light is a holy power spender. So if you have a proc of Divine Purpose at the start of your rotation, you know, you can save 5 holy power on the Hammer of Light, you know, and just keep spamming other abilities. So there's that nice synergy as well. Okay, so now let's go into the Retribution side of the talent tree. So this is the general build that both Mythic Plus setups are going to be using. Both are execution sentence based builds, even though Blizzard buffed Final Reckoning to work better with Hammer of Light, you know, giving it 30% increased damage. It doesn't catch up to Execution Sentence, mostly because it has a shorter cooldown, and it also has better synergy with the priority damage setup that Templar has. You know, you're gonna feed that huge Hammer of Light into the Execution Sentence to repeat 20% of the damage whenever the effect finishes, so it's really strong there. So what's the change between builds? So the first build is an Empyrean Legacy powered build. This makes it so whenever you Judgment, every 20 seconds your next single target holy power ability will automatically throw a Divine Storm with 25% increased effectiveness. So this means that you are going to feed a lot of damage into this Execution Sentence. This effect works in both single target and AoE situations really well. Also has really good synergy with the Templar talent Hammerfall, because since you're throwing 2 holy power spenders in one, the Shake the Heavens effect is going to throw down 4 Imperial Hammers, which again are going to feed into the Execution Sentence to just make that specific target you want to kill disappear. You know, it's really effective for bosses and for priority damage setup. Now, the second build is the more AoE-ish version. You know, you use Imperium Power instead of Imperium Legacy. Whenever you Crusading Strikes, you have a 5% chance per target to make a Divine Storm free and deal 15% increased damage. So this is per target basis because of a weird bug that happened in Dragonflight, meaning that if you have 5 things, you have 25% chance to get a free Divine Storm. Really, really powerful in AoE situations, in dungeons where you're gonna pull big. Mostly because, well, we talked about Wrathful Descent. It's conditional AoE. If you critical strike, you do AoE, a lot of AoE damage. But if you don't, it's just single target. Also, if mobs are too spread around, Wrathful Descent is not going to hit them. So there is where you might want to take Imperium Power to just get that extra AoE from your normal Divine Storms, you know. The only downside of this build is, well, Imperium Power does nothing in single target situations. That if you only have one target, you have 5% chance to get an Imperium Power proc, and it's not even really strong, it's just 15% extra damage. Like I said, this build is better for AoE situations, while the Imperial Legacy build is better for more priority damage setup. Both builds are really powerful. Currently, the Empyrean Power build is a bit stronger, like 0.7% stronger, which is not much, you know. So I'm going to leave both builds down in the description of the video. And well, now let's go into the raid setup. Okay guys, so this is the single target raid build that I'm going to show you. On the general Paladin side of the talent tree, we're going to focus more on survivability and mobility than we are on crowd control, so we're not taking Fist of Justice or Blinding Light. Instead of that, we're taking Obturancy and Seasoned Warhorse for a very, very long horse. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as we were taking when we were using Herald, with the exception that we're not taking Vengeful Wrath because it doesn't really have too much synergy with the talents of Templar. We're taking instead Seal of Order, Divine Resonance, and Divine Purpose, because if we get lucky with a Divine Purpose proc at the start of our rotation, we can save 5 Holy Power and use them on something else, you know, with Hammer of Light. Now, on the Retribution side of the talent tree, there are some changes, but we're still going to be focusing mainly on single target damage dealing. The first change is here with Light's Justice. We're not going to take that. Instead of that, we're taking Swift Justice. This is because we want to throw Judgments very often, so we can buff our Empyrean Hammers with Sanctification, you know, that 10% extra damage stacking buff. Other than that, we're going to be taking dot effects, Burn to Ash and Penitence, because due to recent changes, Empyrean Hammers now are considered a dot effect, so they get the benefit from both of those talents. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We're taking most of our single target talents. Obviously, this is an Execution Sentence build, and we're gonna make that longer with Execution in Will and taking Divine Arbiter for that extra single target in a pinch. This build is actually really good also just by itself on Cleave, because we are going to stack a lot of critical strike for Wrathful Descent, and if there are adds in any fight, it's still going to cleave them, because this thing just cleaves if it critically strikes, so it's just very effective for both single target and AoE and those situations. So yeah, this is going to be the build that I'm going to be leaving down in the description of the video if you want to copy it. Now let's go into stats. Okay guys, let's talk about stats. So these are actually pretty different than when we were using Herald of the Sun, especially in Mythic Plus situations. So for Mythic Plus you want Strength, Critical Strike, Mastery, Haste, and Versatility. So this is mostly because, well, Empyrean Hammers. Remember, Empyrean Hammers can only do AoE damage if they critically strike. So in Mythic Plus, you want to get a lot of critical strikes so you have that consistency in your AoE. After that, you want Mastery, obviously, to make those Empyrean Hammers hit harder, and you want some haste to make your rotation functional. But don't worry if your haste gets a bit low, because also Templar fixes that. You know, you got Undisputed Ruling, which makes Hammer of Light give you 15% haste every for 8 seconds. You know, every time you start your rotation, every 30 seconds. So the uptime on this is around 35% of the dungeon. So you got a lot of haste to work with there. And obviously Versatility is the last one, which should be avoided at all costs because it doesn't really do much for us. Okay, so that's for Mythic Plus. Now for raiding, this changes a lot. So the stats for raiding are the following: Strength, Mastery, Haste, Critical Strike, and Versatility. Now Empyrean Hammers doesn't need to critically strike to do anything in single target situations. Doesn't matter if it splashes or not, you know. So yeah, obviously Mastery and Haste are going to get more value because you want your abilities to hit hard and you want to throw more abilities. So that's the stat weights that we're going to be using. As always, remember to sim your character yourself to get the best results, because every character is different, and depending on what gear you have, you might be using other things. Okay, now let's move into the next part. Okay guys, now let's talk about embellishments. So here we have a small divide in which if you like to raid and raiding is your main focus, you want to go with the Darkmoon Sigil Ascension. This is an embellishment that can only go on a weapon, and what it does is gives you stats every 8 seconds that you're in combat. This can stack up to 10 times, and you want to pair this up with a Writhing Armor Banding, which is going to double the effect of those stacks. This is very powerful in raiding situations because we don't really care too much of the stats that we're going to be getting there, because all of them are pretty useful. You know, obviously Verse is like low value there, but it's still useful in raiding. You don't need to have the Empyrean Hammers critically strike to do single target damage. Now, if you are more of a Mythic Plus player and just focus more on that, I recommend you to get 2 Down Thread Linens. This is an embellishment that goes on any piece of gear that's not jewelry and weapon. So I recommend to put them either on your bracer and and your cloak, or on a bracer or on a boot or a waist. So those are 4 slots that are pretty good to put them on, because they have lower stat value than, let's say, legs or head or chest. You know, don't put it there. So the Down Thread Linen is really powerful because if you're over 80% health, you're going to get a pretty sizable amount of critical strike. And critical strike is incredibly powerful in Mythic Plus because we want those Empyrean Hammers to critically strike so they can splash damage. And it's really consistent. I've had like around 85% uptime on most of my Mythic Plus runs. Especially because Templar is so defensive. We have a lot of shields to prevent damage, and we have more damage reduction. You're not going to have problems having really high uptime on the Down Thread Linen. And well, yeah, those are the embellishments you want for your Retribution Paladin. Now let's go into the next part, which is trinkets. Okay guys, now let's talk about trinkets. So this part hasn't really changed since we swapped from Herald to Templar. The same trinkets we wanted before, we still want now. That brings us to Arakara. So obviously everyone wants the Arakara Sackroot. It's just a very nice trinket that has haste, we still want haste on Templar even though it's our third option stat, because we want our rotation to be consistent. And it also comes with a very consistent proc of strength and some damage effect on top. So yeah, it's a really powerful trinket overall, so you really want it. Now the next trinket is, if you are a Mythic Plus enjoyer, you want to go to the Stone Bolts and get the Skarmorak Shard. This is a really powerful 1.5 minute cooldown trinket that just gives you a boost of mastery. Now, why is it better for Mythic Plus Dungeon is because of the second effect. Whenever you kill something, you get mastery for 15 seconds and it stacks up to 5 times. So that means that even the trinket is on cooldown, you're still going to get some of that mastery effect passively, which is really good for Mythic Plus. Now, if you want to raid more, you want to go to Green Batol, because in Green Batol you can find the Mark of Kadros. It's basically the same thing as the Skarmorak Shard, but instead of giving you passive mastery, it just gives the mastery up front, you know, when you press the trinket cooldown, which is really powerful for raiding situations, because you don't kill stuff before the raid boss, so you don't get that extra mastery from the Skarmorak Shard. Mark of Kadros, really powerful. Personally, I'm using Arakara Sackroot plus a Mark of Kadros because I have been super unlucky on my Stone Balls and I haven't seen a Skarmorak Shard drop. So yeah, those are the trinkets that we want. Now let's go to the next part of the video. Okay guys, now let's talk about enchantments, gems, and consumables. So, enchantments first. For your cloak, you want to get a chant of Winged Grace. This is just going to give you a nice amount of avoidance for both Radiant and Mythic Plus content. For your chest, you want to get Crystalline Radiance. This should have a lower price now. It just gives you a large amount of main stat, which is always good for us. And next one, you want to get Chant of Armored Avoidance, which will give you 1000 avoidance on your bracers, which is really powerful. Both Mythic Plus and rainy situations, you like the damage reduction. Next up, you want to get Stormbone Armor Kit for your legs, which is going to give you a nice amount of main stat plus stamina. On your boot, you want to get Defender's March, which is another enchantment that was really expensive, but now it should be a lot lower because of the drop in prices of Tinder boxes. It just gives you a large amount of stamina, which is nice. For your rings, you want any combination of haste, mastery, and critical strike, depending on what the simulation is going to tell you. Always sim yourself to know what stats you want, so that's going to vary from person to person. Now, for the weapon, you have to make a choice, and depending on the content you do. If you are mostly focused on raiding, you want to get the Authority of the Depths. This is just an enchantment that does damage and it stacks over time. It's going to do more and more damage. For Mythic Plus dungeons, you want to get a Stormbound Artistry. This is just an enchantment that gives you a large amount of mastery. It has a very nice uptime. I think it's around 25%. So it's pretty powerful for AoE situations, which you are mostly in Mythic Plus. So yeah, those are all the enchantments that you are going to want. Okay, now for gems. Gems is in the same situation as we are for enchantments on rings. This is going to vary from person to person depending on your stat weights. But I'm going to show you what I'm personally using. So there's one gem that everyone wants to have that's going to be the same, and it's the Culminating Blasphemy. This should be a lot cheaper than it was in the past. I think it was like 20k before, but now I think it's around 5k, so it's pretty affordable for everyone. It's really powerful because it gives you primary stat and also gives you an extra effect for each color of Algari gem. 0.15% extra critical effect. So this is very important for Templar because we do love critical strike, especially in Mythic Plus situations. Because of this, you want to get different color gems. For example, for my purple gem, I have Mastery Haste. For my red gem, I have a Quick Ruby, which gives me critical strike and haste. For my blue gem, I have Versatility and Mastery. And for my green gems, I have Haste Crit and Haste Critical Strike. These are all the gems that the simulation told me to get, so I just got those. Like I said, this is in the same situation of rings. You know, you just have to follow what the simulation is going to tell you in terms of gems that you want to get. But any combination of, you know, critical strike, mastery, critical strike, haste is going to work fine, except for the blue gem. You know, you have to pick a blue gem, so you're probably gonna get like verse mastery or verse crit or verse haste or something like that. Even though we don't like haste, we need it to make our culminating blasphemy work and give us that extra critical strike effect. Now let's go into consumables. Okay, so for consumables, let's start with the flask of choice. If you are raiding, the flask of alchemical cows is going to be your best one. whenever you use it, you get a large amount of a secondary stat, a random secondary stat at the cost of other 2 secondary stats. This effect is randomized again every 30 seconds. So in the same vein as why people use the embellishment Darkmoon Sigil in raiding, it's because as paladins we really don't care what stat we get in raids, we just want a large amount of it. So yeah, Alchemical Cows fills that need. Now, in Mythic Plus situations, you want to be a bit more consistent on what stat you want to get. So, if you're lacking Critical Strike, the Flask of Tempered Aggression can be really good if you don't have a lot of it in your gear. In my case, I have a lot of it and I'm using the Flask of Tempered Mastery because I want my spells to just hit harder because I already have a high amount of Critical Strike to make them crit, you know? And we want that consistency because obviously Imperial Hammers require to crit so they do AoE damage. Now, let's go to our main potion, which there is only basically one that we are going to use in most situations, which is the Tempered Potion. It just gives you the secondary stats that you don't get from your main flask. So for example, if you are using the Flask of Tempered Aggression, this gives you Critical Strike, you're going to get Mastery first and Haste whenever you use the potion. And same with the other flasks. So yeah, just a really powerful potion. And yeah, the other potion that you can use is the Potion of Unwavering Focus. This one is more for single target only fights. If you only have one target that you're going to be facing, this potion is really powerful because it's going to give you a large amount of percentage damage increase against them. But it's very, very niche. Almost all the time you're going to be using the Tempered Potion. Now, let's go into foods. So basically, any of the feast is going to be good for you, especially the sushi feast that some people drop in raid situations. Now, if you have to pick personal foods, you have some options. I personally go with Belladar's Bounty because it's the cheapest food that you can get and always make it hearty so you don't lose it if you die in a Mythic Plus situation. Now, there's some tech that I can show you guys here, which is this, the Hearty Dip Fin Patty. Oh, well, just deep fin patty, you know, if you don't make it hearty. It gives you, instead of just your highest secondary stat, if you maybe want a bit more haste, because, for example, in my simulations, I'm lacking a bit of haste. So I use this patty because it gives you 234 haste and 234 critical strike, which is pretty powerful for me. And I combine it with the next part of our consumable guide, which is the temporary enchantments on our weapon. So there's 2 of them that you can get. One is the Algari Mana Oil and the other one is the Iron Claw Whetstone. So I'm currently using the Algari Mana Oil, which gives me more critical strike and also more haste. Combined with the Deep Fin Patty, it gives me the perfect stats that I want. You know, whenever I'm in a Mythic Plus situation, I have like 32% critical strike, 17% haste, and like 45% mastery, which is just on the spot on the stats that I want to get. Now, the other option is getting the Iron Claw Whetstone. This is a bit more expensive and gives you a large amount of attack power. Depending on what your stat weights are, sometimes strength is not going to be your highest simming stat. So if that happens, some secondary stats are going to be better, so then the Algari Oil comes in, you know. It's going to depend on your personal stat weights which of these temporary enchantments you're going to be getting. And well, yeah, that's pretty much for the normal consumables that you're going to be using. Now, if you're going to be try-harding a lot, I recommend getting the only augment rune that there is, which is the crystallized augment rune. The only problem with this is it doesn't last through death, and each one of these costs almost 3k gold. So they are very expensive. So only if you are really try-harding a key, use these. Don't break the bank if necessary, you know. And well, those are all the consumables that you're going to be needing to push keys or do raiding. Now let's go into the next part. Okay, so this is the last part of the video, the rotation. This is the basic one. You use Blade of Justice, Divine Toll, Divine Storm, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, and then you just keep doing your rotation as normal, spamming as much Blade of Justice as you can for extensions and Shake the Heavens, and Judgments to do more damage with Sanctification. This opener helps us to fish an extra Crusade proc at the start of the rotation. That's why we do the Divine Storm first. But if you don't get it, you can just continue as normal and you have explosive stars with a bunch of Sanctification stacks. The second opener is what I call the fast one. You start with Blade of Justice, Judgment, Execution Sentence, Wake of Ashes, Hammer of Light, recharge Holy Power with Divine Toll, and use Empyrean Legacy proc there. So after that, you just keep your rotation as normal, extending with the Blade of Justice as much as you can, and Judgment for extra stacks of Sanctification. This opener exchanges that little gamble at the start of the other one where we use Divine Storm to fish for Crusade procs, instead of just using Divine Toll as refuel for Holy Power with more stacks of Crusade for extra damage, and also we get to use the Sanctification stacks from the Divine Toll with the multiplicative value of a high stack Crusade. Both openers are usable. And well guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope this short crash course guide on Templar helps you in Mythic Plus and do better in raids. One more thing I forgot, I'll leave all my weak auras and macros down in the description in an easy to access Google Docs with simple explanations on what they do. And with that, if you enjoy my content, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching everyone.